I used to tell myself I liked driving a cab because it was simple. Point A to point B, meter running, no office politics, no pretending. In reality, I liked it because the numbers made sense. If I drove 12 hours, I could predict the day within $20. If I skipped a meal and didn't buy coffee twice, I could shave another 40 off my weekly spending. I was the kind of person who clipped coupons even when I didn't need to, not out of desperation but out of habit. Control. By the time I was 42, control was basically my religion. I had a spreadsheet for everything. The car lease, insurance, my son's community college tuition, the credit card I kept almost paid down, but never quite killed. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't reckless. I paid my taxes. I didn't gamble. I didn't do crypto. I didn't lend money to relatives. So when I say money is what unraveled me, I don't mean I was chasing yachts or fantasies. I mean I was trying to hold my life in place with both hands, and one day someone slid a stack of bills into the gap and my grip slipped. The ride that started it was on a Tuesday afternoon. Slow hour, drizzle that made the whole city smell like wet concrete. Dispatch pinged me for a pickup outside a medical building downtown. An elderly man came out, holding a folder tight to his chest like it mattered. He waved with 2 fingers, like he was used to being answered. He moved carefully, but not helplessly. His coat was nice, wool-tailored, and his shoes were polished even though the sidewalks were a mess. When he got in, he gave an address that was just a bank. Not a branch, the bank. The kind with a marble lobby and a security guard who greets you by name. "Take your time," he said as I pulled away. "I'm not in a hurry. I'm retired. You can't rush being useless." I smiled because it was the right response, but I clocked the folder, the way he kept checking it, the way his hands shook a little when he adjusted his seatbelt. He wasn't nervous about the ride. He was nervous about what was inside that folder. My meter clicked. My mind did the automatic math. 20 minutes there, 10 minutes waiting, maybe a small tip if he was decent. That was my world back then. Time converted into money. Money converted into the illusion that everything would stay stable. He looked out the window and said, "Do you drive every day?" "6 days," I said. "Sometimes 7 if I need it." "You always need it," he said, not unkindly. "That's the trap." I told myself he was just talkative. Old guys like to philosophize with cab drivers. It's part of the job. Nod. Keep your hands at 10 and 2. Act like you've heard it all. But then he asked what I paid for my lease, what my insurance ran, what I cleared after gas. Not prying exactly, like he already knew the answers and wanted to see if I'd lie. At the bank, he asked me to wait. "I'll pay the meter," he said. "I'm not a thief." I almost laughed at the choice of words, but I let it go. He walked inside with the folder hugged close. Through the glass, I saw him talk to the guard like they knew each other. 10 minutes became 30. I kept thinking about my own bills, the way time waiting is time not earning. Then he came back out, slower now, like something heavy had been set down but not in a relieving way. "Can you take me to a diner?" he asked. "Nothing fancy. I want eggs and coffee and I want to pretend I'm still a regular person." That should have been the point where I said no, ended the ride, went back to dispatch. But it was slow, and he was paying, and there was something about him, this quiet authority that didn't require raising his voice. At the diner, he surprised me by asking me to sit. "Off the clock," he said. "I'll cover it." I told him I couldn't, that I had to stay with the cab. "You can," he said. "You're choosing not to." I should have walked away. Instead, I parked where I could see the car and slid into the booth across from him. I told myself it was just coffee. 10 minutes. He introduced himself as Walter. He asked my name, and when I said it, he repeated it like he was filing it. Then he said, "You seem like someone who keeps his receipts." "That's not a compliment," I said. "It is," he replied. "Receipts are proof. Proof is power." Walter didn't tell me he was rich. He didn't need to. He talked about assets the way other people talk about hobbies. He said he built a business when he was young, sold part of it, kept part, and spent the last decade watching his kids treat him like an ATM with a pulse. I made sympathetic noises. I've heard every version of that story. Then he asked, "Do you have kids?" "One," I said. "He's 20. Good kid. Expensive age." Walter said. I laughed because it was true. Tuition, car insurance, groceries that vanish overnight. My son had a job, but every month there was something. A laptop, a medical bill, a blown tire. I handled it because that's what dads do, and because it made me feel necessary. Walter stirred his coffee and said, "What if I told you I can take some weight off?" I shook my head automatically. I don't take charity. It's not charity, he said. It's business. He slid a card across the table. Just a name and a phone number, no company logo. On the back he wrote an address and a time, Thursday, 10 a.m. "Come by," he said. "Listen, if you don't like what you hear, you leave and we never speak again. But you'll at least know someone saw you." I told myself I was going because I was curious, because it was a story to tell. But when I drove home that night, I tucked his card into my wallet like it was something fragile. The address was a small office above a strip of storefronts. Nothing like the bank. The waiting room smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. Walter greeted me himself, no assistant. He didn't waste time. He owned a cluster of boring businesses. Laundromats, a self-storage facility, a couple of small commercial rentals. "Not sexy," he said. "Sexy is unstable. Boring keeps the lights on." He explained he was reorganizing things for estate planning, and he wanted to give a small share of one holding company to someone outside his family. Someone steady. Someone who wouldn't drain him or fight him. "That's insane," I said. Walter shrugged. "My family will fight regardless. I'm just choosing my battlefield." He had paperwork ready, already drafted by a lawyer. 5% of a holding LLC in exchange for me acting as a manager in name and helping with basic tasks. Driving him to appointments, dropping documents, sitting in on meetings if he needed another person present. I stared at the numbers on the projected distributions. Quarterly checks that could wipe out my credit card debt in a year. Money that wasn't tied to my body being behind the wheel 12 hours a day. "Why me?" I asked again because I needed it to make moral sense. Walter's eyes were pale and sharp. "Because you didn't beg. Because you look like a man who'd rather suffer quietly than ask for help. Those are easy people to buy, by the way." I bristled. "I'm not for sale." Walter didn't blink. "Then don't sign." I signed. At first it felt like I'd won something without cheating. Walter paid me for rides separately, always in a check with transport written in the memo line, like he was careful about paper trails. The LLC distributions showed up in my account like clockwork. Not millions, but enough that my stomach unclenched for the first time in years. I paid down my credit card. I fixed the leak in the bathroom ceiling. I told my son we could handle another semester without loans. I even bought my wife, Denise, a new washer when ours started making a grinding noise. I didn't tell her where the money came from. That's where the first hairline crack formed. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd explain once it was real. I told myself I didn't want to get her hopes up. The truth was uglier. I liked having something that was mine alone, something she couldn't budget or question. Denise and I weren't in crisis, but money has a way of making resentments audible. She'd been asking me to cut back my hours, to see a doctor about my blood pressure. I always said, after we're caught up. Suddenly we were caught up, and I still didn't change. I just held the secret tighter. Walter called at odd times. "Can you drive me to a meeting? Can you pick up documents? Can you sit in the lobby while I talk to my lawyer?" It wasn't hard. It was a little weird, but I told myself I was earning it. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't hurting anyone. I was just benefiting from a rich old man's paranoia. Then Walter asked me to open a new bank account for the LLC distributions. To simplify things. That should have been my warning. Instead, I did it. The first major twist came in the form of a woman in a sharp blazer who showed up at Walter's office while I was there. She didn't knock. She walked in like she owned the air. "Dad?" she said, flat and cold. "So this is the driver." Walter's jaw tightened. "Lydia, leave." She looked at me, then at the paperwork on the desk. "You're giving away equity now? To strangers?" I stood up, suddenly aware that I was the stranger. "I can leave," I said. Lydia's smile didn't touch her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you can. with whatever you've convinced him to hand over. Walter snapped, "That's enough." Lydia turned her focus back on him. "You're doing this to punish us." Walter's voice lowered. "I'm doing this because you treated me like a vault." She pointed at me. "And he's what? Your conscience?" I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say I hadn't asked for any of it. But my bank account history sat there like a confession. After she left, Walter looked older, his shoulders sagging. "She'll sue," he said casually, like he was talking about rain. "She can do that?" I asked. Walter gave a thin smile. "People can do anything when they think money belongs to them." That night, I finally read through the documents more carefully. 5%, yes. But also manager in name, signatory on certain accounts, someone who could be blamed if things went wrong. I told myself it was fine. Walter was legitimate. Lawyers were involved. I wasn't doing anything illegal. Still, I didn't tell Denise. And that silence started to feel less like privacy and more like dirt under the rug. Walter's health got worse in small ways that were easy to ignore until they weren't. He'd forget dates. He'd ask me the same question twice. Once, he handed me an envelope and told me to take it to the accountant. Then couldn't remember which accountant he meant. He started talking openly about keeping things out of probate, about minimizing taxes, about how Lydia and his son had already taken enough. I should have stepped back. Instead, I leaned in. This is the part that still makes my stomach turn when I admit it. The money had already changed how I saw him. Not as a person, but as a source. He asked me to sign a couple of documents in front of a notary. "Routine," he said. "Just moving things cleanly." One document was a personal guarantee for a line of credit tied to the storage facility. Just in case. Walter waved it off. "Standard. You won't ever be called." I hesitated. "Why me?" "Because you're on the paperwork already," he said. "And I'm tired. And I need this done." Tired people can make you feel cruel for having boundaries. I signed, telling myself the same lie I'd used for years. It's fine. It's temporary. It'll never matter. The distributions increased after that. Walter called it a bonus quarter. I paid off the last of my credit card and felt something close to euphoria. Denise noticed. "We're suddenly okay," she said one night. "How?" I told her I'd been getting more airport runs. I hated myself the moment it left my mouth. Shame comes before anger, at least for people like me. Anger is what you use to avoid looking at shame too long. Lydia found Denise before I found the courage to tell her. That's the second twist, the one that made everything personal in a way money alone hadn't. Denise worked part-time at a library. Lydia came in like she belonged there, asked for her by name, and introduced herself as Walter's daughter. Then she said, very politely, "I think your husband is involved in something you should know about." Denise came home that day with her face tight. She didn't yell. That's what scared me. She set her purse down and said, "Tell me about Walter." I tried to talk around it. I tried to frame it as harmless. Denise listened, then asked, "How much?" When I told her, her eyes widened not at the number, but at the fact that I'd hidden it. "So you've been lying," she said. "I didn't want to jinx it," I said, which was pathetic and I knew it. Denise asked to see the paperwork. I resisted, then caved. She read in silence, lips moving slightly like she was doing the math. When she saw the personal guarantee, she looked up fast. "What is this?" she asked. "It's nothing," I said. "Standard." Denise's voice stayed calm, which meant she was furious. "We don't sign standard things that can bankrupt us." I told her Walter was legitimate. I told her lawyers were involved. Denise stared at me like I'd become a stranger. "You think legitimacy is contagious," she said. "Like standing next to rich people makes you safe." The next day, Lydia sent me a certified letter. It claimed Walter was being manipulated, that his capacity was questionable, that any transfer of equity could be challenged. It demanded I stop profiting immediately. I showed Walter. He laughed, then coughed hard enough to turn red. "Let her try," he said. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the story where the old man rewards the hardworking driver and the greedy family gets taught a lesson. That's the kind of story people like. Feels fair. Real life doesn't care what feels fair. Walter called me one morning and said, "Take me to the lawyer, today." His voice sounded thinner than usual, like paper. At the law office, he asked me to sit in. "Witness," he said, "for my own protection." The lawyer reviewed documents with him. Amendments, beneficiary designations, another adjustment to the LLC operating agreement. Walter wanted my share increased from 5 to 10, and he wanted it done quickly. I should have refused. Instead, I sat there while a man with failing health tried to use money like a weapon against his own blood, and I let myself benefit. Afterward, Walter asked me to stop by a pharmacy, then a grocery store. In the parking lot, he suddenly gripped my arm. His hand felt light, bones and skin. "You're not like them," he said. "You'll do the right thing." I didn't answer because I didn't know what the right thing was anymore. There was the right thing morally and the right thing financially, and I'd been pretending those were the same. 2 days later, Walter didn't answer my calls. I drove to his condo building and found an ambulance outside. A neighbor recognized me and said, "They took him out at dawn." At the hospital, a nurse told me only family could visit. Lydia stood at the desk, eyes red but posture rigid. She saw me and her face hardened like a door locking. "He's not seeing you," she said. "I'm not here for—" I started. "For what?" she snapped. "For the money? For the role you've been playing?" Walter died that night. For about 24 hours, I felt a strange false resolution. Like the worst part, his suffering, the tension was over, and now it would just be paperwork and grief, and then life would settle. That's what I told myself while my phone stayed silent. Then the distributions stopped. The third twist wasn't dramatic. It was a letter from a probate attorney informing me that all assets tied to Walter's estate were frozen pending a challenge. My membership interest in the LLC was listed as disputed. The account I'd opened was flagged. The bank asked questions. Then the IRS asked questions. Those quarterly checks I'd treated like a miracle? Some had been issued under a tax ID that didn't match the structure described in the operating agreement. Walter had been moving money between entities like cups in a shell game. Maybe to avoid taxes. Maybe to hide from his kids. Maybe just because he liked feeling clever. Whatever the reason, my name was now attached to it. Manager. Signatory. The guy who'd signed a personal guarantee without understanding what he was guaranteeing. Denise sat at our kitchen table with the letters spread out like a losing hand. "How much do we owe?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted, and hearing myself say it made me feel small. I'd built my whole identity on knowing. My lawyer, expensive, brisk, said the same thing twice. "You are not the main target, but you are exposed." He asked why Walter chose me. He asked if I'd ever seen him confused. He asked if I'd ever encouraged him to change documents. I told the truth as carefully as I could, which is another way of saying I tried to make myself look less guilty. Lydia filed to contest everything. She claimed undue influence. She subpoenaed my phone records, my bank statements. I had to hand over every deposit that had once felt like relief. There was a moment in that mess where I actually felt relieved. Relieved that the secret was over, that I didn't have to keep pretending the money was clean. Guilt and relief can sit in the same chair. That's a hard thing to explain until you've lived it. I tried to negotiate. I offered Lydia a settlement. I'd give back some of what I'd received, keep a smaller share, walk away quietly. I told myself it was reasonable. Lydia's attorney responded with a spreadsheet of their own. They wanted it all back, plus damages, plus legal fees. "You don't understand," Lydia told me during a mediation call, voice icy through the speaker. "My father didn't gift you. He hid behind you." That sentence recontextualized everything. The diner, the ICU, the talk about receipts and proof. I hadn't been rewarded. I'd been used as a tool in a family war. Denise stopped sleeping. She started keeping a notebook of every conversation, every expense, like she was building a case. Maybe she was. My son called less. When he did, he sounded cautious, like he didn't want to step on a landmine. "You okay?" he asked once. I almost told him yes out of reflex. Then I heard how absurd it sounded. I don't know, I said. The credit union where Denise and I kept our checking account froze a portion because of a levy related to potential tax liability. Watching a teller explain that to Denise while other customers stood in line behind her was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. Not because of the money itself, but because my control had been exposed as a costume. I started driving longer shifts again to pay the lawyer, to cover the gaps, to chase a stability that kept moving further away. It felt like trying to shovel water back into a cracked pool. The fourth twist landed like an aftershock. The storage facility, the one tied to the personal guarantee I'd signed, defaulted on a loan. It turned out Walter's boring businesses weren't as stable as he'd painted them. He'd taken out a line of credit during the pandemic to cover vacancies and upgrades. He'd used future rent projections as collateral. When tenants left and rates rose, the numbers stopped working. The bank didn't care that Walter was dead. They didn't care that Lydia was suing. They cared that my signature was on a guarantee. My lawyer said, "We can argue you didn't understand." The bank's lawyer said, "Your understanding is irrelevant." I sat in my cab one night outside the same diner where Walter first offered to take weight off, and I stared at the steering wheel until my hands went numb. I kept thinking about how easily I'd been flattered, how quickly I'd accepted the story where I was chosen for being steady. Denise found the original guarantee copy in our file box and held it up like evidence in a trial. "You signed us into someone else's debt," she said quietly. "I didn't know," I whispered. Denise's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "That's the problem," she said. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know." That was the moral failure, plain as daylight. My denial wasn't ignorance. It was a choice. The mediation with Lydia collapsed. The probate fight dragged. The IRS audit widened. The bank started calling daily. I stopped answering unknown numbers, which is a childish thing to do when you're 42 and drowning. There was a brief stretch, maybe 3 weeks, when it seemed like things might stabilize. My lawyer said we could likely discharge part of the guarantee in bankruptcy. The IRS offered a payment plan if we accepted penalties. Lydia's side hinted they'd settle if I walked away with nothing but no further claims. I called that good news. Denise didn't. She said, "That's just losing slower." I filed for bankruptcy anyway. It felt like signing my name on a public admission that my whole responsible identity had been fake. The trustee asked about my income, my assets, my spending. I sat there answering questions about the quarterly checks like I was someone else, like it had happened to a dumber man. Denise moved into the guest room. She didn't threaten divorce, which would have been easier in a way. She just became distant, polite, exhausted. One evening, after a long shift, I came home and found her sorting through old photos. She held up one from our son's high school graduation. Me smiling, arm around Denise, looking like a man with his life together. "I don't know who that is," she said. "It's me," I replied, and hated how weak it sounded. She looked at me for a long time. "No," she said finally. "It's who you wanted to be seen as." That cut deeper than any lawsuit. I kept driving because driving was the only place my body knew what to do. But now every fare felt like a reminder of what money turns people into. Desperate, evasive, calculating. I started noticing how often people talk about money without naming it. Opportunities, help, security, fairness. Walter had spoken that language fluently. So had I, apparently. The case didn't end with a dramatic courtroom moment. It ended with paperwork. A settlement where Lydia got the businesses, I got nothing, and we all paid lawyers until the numbers stopped meaning anything. The IRS plan will last years. The bankruptcy wiped some debt and left other parts intact. The bank still sends statements with bold totals like they're daring me to deny reality. Walter's name doesn't come up anymore, not out loud, but he's there in the quiet. The paused conversation when Denise checks the mail, the way my son avoids talking about finances with me, the way I flinch when my phone rings. Sometimes I try to tell myself Walter meant well, that he saw a working man and wanted to share. Then I remember his line about buying people and receipts being power, and I realize he didn't give me a share of his business the way people tell that story. He gave me a role in his exit plan, and I played it because it felt good to be chosen. I still drive, not because I love it, but because it's what I can do that doesn't require anyone trusting me with more than a destination. Every now and then I pass the marble bank where I first took Walter, and I picture him stepping out with that folder pressed to his chest, already planning the shape of the mess he'd leave behind. The unsettling part isn't that he used me, it's that I didn't mind being used as long as it paid. And now, when I look at my hands on the wheel, I can't tell where the line is between the man I thought I was and the one money revealed.